the basis, but not going to be weird like that.
So it's an interesting sugya. This is the sugya of Shnei Tavshilin. All right. So the Mishnah on Kuf Yud Aleph Aleph tells us that they brought before him matzah, chazeres, and charoses. What do those three things have in common?
Pesach dick.
Well, more than that. You could cheat with these things.
Matzah's over 70.
Matzah, chazeres / mar, and charoses. What do they share in common?
Matzah what?
Better than that. Chazer. Well, the mar. Matzah, mar, and charoses. What do they share in common?
All mitzvahs.
They're all mitzvahs alayla, right? Now, the Shnei Tavshilin, how do we know they're not mitzvahs alayla? So, but the Shnei Tavshilin, as we all know, are not mitzvahs alayla. In fact, this will be part one of the share. Part two we'll do next week on Sunday. But halach l'maisa. What does everyone do today for Shnei Tavshilin? Come on, the common minhag.
Dates and the shank bone.
And the shank bone. Shank bone. Love the shank bone. So everyone today does shank bone and egg, right? We'll get to that maybe later, how that minhag emerged. But you'll see the Mishnah never says anything about eggs or shank bones. It says Shnei Tavshilin.
Oh.
No, that's not.
Okay.
Yeah. That's not what the point is trying to bring out. But now, are you chayav to eat those?
No.
What's your machlokes if you can eat them or not? It's interesting.
Well, I thought the whole thing was zecher.
They are. We'll get to that. We'll get to the Gemara. But I'm saying, but look, sometimes I like to start from what we do today, and then let's start working backwards.
If it's zecher, then you would have to eat it, whatever, 2,500 years ago. You would have had to eat the egg.
Correct,
the
but you know what about? There was no egg or shank bone 25 years ago.
Okay, so
right.
the argument, why would you do that?
Yeah. So I'm just saying there are achronim a whole that.
That is a mitzvah alayla, just not a mitzvah alayla.
Oh, so we'll get to that. Okay. Good. Okay. All right. So on the seder plate or the ka'ara, you have the mitzvah alayla and the shnei tavshilin. So the question is, what are the shnei tavshilin? Now, just to get another method, just to get our minds around this area, there is a precedent in halacha for the idea of a shnei tavshilin. Before we get to the question.
What's Shnei Tavshilin?
No, Shnei Tavshilin.
Yeah, it's
why this plays a role, but on Erev Tisha B'Av, you can only have one cooked dish.
What the?
You know that, though. The Gemara starts Kuf Yud Daled on the Beis, my Shnei Tavshilin. It's about 2/3 of the way down. Go.
Yeah. My Shnei Tavshilin Amaravuna Silka Avaruza.
All right, so what are these two cooked dishes?
And rice.
Beets.
Beets?
Yeah, I think it's beets and rice.
Okay.
That's,
vegetable and rice.
Okay, so what are these two cooked dishes? Now, what is he when he says two cooked dishes? I mean, he's telling you that it could be anything. Okay, but immediately the Rashbam jumps up on that, and Tosos also. They basically say the same thing. What do they mention?
For sure, 2 pieces of meat.
Right. So, read the Rashi.
Right.
Silka.
Rashi or
Rashbam.
Okay.
Sorry, Rashbam. Silka. Rabusahi. That's the key thing.
Oh.
Why? The Kol Shekain. And Tosa says the same exact thing. Meaning what? Meaning that you can use anything you want, any two cooked dishes. But so we'll get to that. Kol Shekain Shnei Minei Basar. But of course, not saying ideal yet. Of course, you could use 2 pieces of meat. Okay.
Of course.
So why would you use 2 pieces of meat?
One dish, 2 pieces of meat.
What? No, 2 separate pieces of meat. Just let's get our facts down. Okay. According to the first man Amar. You can bring out beets and rice. So there's 2 things that are implied from that. 1, it could be anything, any 2 cooked dishes, and 2, what should they be? Different, right? 1 is A and 1 is B. All right, you can't bring out. It would seem like at this point I can't bring out
2 pieces of meat.
No, I can't bring out 2 like a 2 rices, like a balsamini rice or whatever it is, a Persian rice and another kind of rice.
2 cooked anythings.
Oh, so right. So right. So, but we'll get to that. But the Gemara is telling you, the Rashbam and Tosas are telling you that of course, if you want to use 2 different types of meat, Shnei Minei Basar, 2 different kinds of meat, of course you could use it as well.
So
we have to explain why that's the of course.
Or explain what is a min.
No, what do you mean? Why did you explain what a min is? It's another question you can ask also. I mean, it's not a meta question, but you could ask that question.
Kidneys?
Forget that. Oh no, so the Gemara is going to say what's a kidneys? Forget that. I mean, more basic question. What's the requirement? 2 cooked dishes. So why should they be cooked? What if I just brought, I don't know, an apple and a carrot? What's wrong with that?
Yeah,
or salami?
Something about it is zecher.
What's it called?
Why is it bedafka tafshil?
A raw cow right now? You want to bring an apple?
No. I mean something that's edible. But I'm saying the point is you can't eat a raw cow. But I'm just saying why is tafshil so important here? We're gonna have to answer that. Why is it tafshil? You'll see why that has to be the question. All right, go on. So that's mandamar number 1, right? Rice and beets. Okay, now skip ahead because I don't care about the fact that he found out that it was not a problem to eat it. About rice, go to Chizkiah. Chizkiah Amar. couple lines past that, like 4 lines, something like that.
4 lines.
Whatever. Chizkiah. Chizkiah.
The Dag Bebeitza.
Sha'alav. Oh, whoa. So Chizkiah says, no. He says, even, okay, meaning, even what? Even a dog and beitza that's on it. So what does that mean? Rashbam? No, that's a separate sugya. Okay. So what's Chizkiah saying? Even a dog and a beitza that's on it. Why should that be the case?
One dish.
Read Rashbam. Okay. Stop trying to avoid reading Rashbam. A field dog of beitza sha'alav. So what would they do?
Grind up.
Well, it's spread it out like an egg dish on the fish. Okay. It's also rebusa, right? Why? Beautiful. So what would you think if I saw fish and egg on top of it? It's dummy l'tavshil achad, but nonetheless it's still shtei tavshilin. So we have machlokas. First shita holds A and B. Second shita holds A and B can be together, cooked together. Look like they're together.
Distinguishable to some extent?
Well, they seem like they are. We'll get to that. That's a lashita.
Who said they're arguing?
Because everyone, all the Rishonim ones are arguing. Okay. He's more meko, right?
Okay, the other question is, why?
So Rav Yosef Amar. So this is the cryptic part. So Rav Yosef. Now, if you just took Rav Yosef literally, what does it sound like he's saying?
Meat.
Okay. First of all, he's saying you have to have meat. Okay, 2 different pieces of meat. One zecher le Pesach, one zecher chagiga. Right. Look at Rashi by Shnei. Look at Rashi from Shnei Minei Basar, just to make things more confusing. Sli keneged Pesach. Kach Reish Rabbeinu Chanan Rami. The Tosfos is going to take him to task, but Rabbeinu Chanan says what? Says that one of the 2 pieces has to be roasted. Okay, so but there's a problem. So how do you read Rav Yosef then? What's Rav Yosef saying? He's saying 2 things. So he's saying 2 things.
Yeah.
First, he's saying you have to have 2 pieces of meat, right? And the second thing he's saying is that in those 2 pieces that are different, right? One has to be cooked differently.
Yeah.
Right?
One has to be cooked or cooked differently.
Cooked sli. One has to be roasted. Now, why would it have to be roasted? Well, you read Tosfos, but no, the Pesach was certainly was roasted. Okay. But the question is that I'm going to read the Ran in a second. The question is, how does this fit into the first 2 shitas? What?
You get some burgers bar after this.
Okay, so now last shita. This is the hardest one. Okay, so what does that mean?
Meat and its sauce.
Right. So it's like the broth you make from meat. Like you can boil out the marrow and it becomes broth. But what's his point? Let's understand what his point
separate.
is.
They're 2.
Yeah. Well, they're separate. But they're
being 2 entities.
But they're one min.
Oh, right. 1 min?
Yeah. In other words, I take a piece of meat, a piece of meat with bone, okay, and I make a broth from the bone, from the marrow, okay. So what do I how many minim do I have in front of me?
Sounds like
1. 1. No, it's 1 min. So this is how the Bachlan's way. It's 1 min. He's the most mekel. He's the most mekel.
1 piece of meat.
It counts as 2, even though it's 1 min.
What?
That's what we have to answer.
What counts as 2? The marrow, the broth.
So the broth is yeah. He's holding
only 1 piece of meat here.
But you have meat and soup. The broth around it. Okay.
And
so there's 2.
That's the food.
We have to answer that. To answer why it's shtei minei.
Tastes good.
Okay. How do you organize these positions? This is very difficult because you have to start categorizing who says what. All right. I'm gonna add Tosfos into the picture in a second, but before we do that, yes, we have to start wrapping our heads around what's going on here. So the Ran clarifies one important thing. The Ran says this. He says, all the Amoraim, Kulu Amorai, Modu, the Taimish, the Shnei Tavshilin, Mishum Hachihu. So everyone agrees that the objective of having the 2 cooked dishes is Zecher LePesach, Zecher LeChagiga. No one's questioning that premise. In other words, what ties all 4 positions together? That why do you have 2 cooked dishes? To remind you of the Korban Pesach and the Korban Chagiga. Okay? Okay, but that's because he's saying otherwise what would be the purpose of the Shnei Tavshilin? The Ran's saying you cannot read the Gemara to mean 3 shitas hold 2 cooked dishes stam and 1 holds is for Zeicha the Korban Pesach Zeicha Chagiga. They all hold that. And you said, what's Rav Yosef doing? So he says, Rav Yosef matam ka'amar. Why is he saying this? Kolomar, kiven the Shnei Tavshilin Zeicha l'Shnei Korbanos saying. right? Since the two cooked dishes are coming for the purpose of zecher lekor and pesach and zecher chagiga, right? Bayina shnei minei basar. So therefore, you must have two pieces of meat. So the way the other three shitas are learning is that you can use two pieces of meat, but you can use them, but you're yotzei just with. Let's say according to the first shita with two vegetables or whatever it is, two cooked dishes. But Rav Yosef is saying no, they consecrated it as being two pieces of meat because it's supposed to be zeichel korban, zeichel chagiga, and zeichel korban pesach. So what question must you ask on that? There's an obvious question you have to ask. Yeah. So how could rice and if you're telling me you're supposed to be remembering the korban pesach and the korban chagiga, why wouldn't you want to say you should use meat? Should you see the chiyuv should be? I mean, Rav Yosef makes the most sense, right? I have meat in front of me. I'm going to think about the korban pesach and the other piece of meat, the korban chagiga.
I mean, I think.
So, the question is: so you have a 4 machlokas, okay? Shnei Tavshilin, is it and 4 machlokas with everyone premising that the objective of Shnei Tavshilin is pesach and chagiga? First, shita holds you can, as long as they're two different species, you're fine. Okay, so it could be, let's say, rice and beets, but they have to be cooked. Which you have to answer also: why do they have to be cooked? Second shita holds, even if they're cooked together, or like made together and served together, like rice and eggs. Fish and eggs. Right, that's the way they used to do it. They used to spread the egg on the fish. Chizkiah holds that's still okay because it's still, even though it's nira tavshil echad, it's still 2 tavshilin. Rav Yosef comes along and says you can only use 2 types of meat, right? And the last shita Ravina holds that he seems like the most makel. He holds you can use the same type of meat as long as one's, if you can use you can use meat and it's soup, meaning it's one meat, but in 2 one soup and one's liquid meat. Right, one's liquid and one's solid. That'd be considered sufficient. So what's machlokas? And not only what's machlokas, okay, that's one thing you have to define. What's the other thing you have to define? So within Rav Yosef, you have a machlokas within Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef holds shnei minei basar, okay? Rashbam learns shnei minei basar means what? Means one has to be roasted and one has to be cooked. Now look at Tosfos. Tosfos says shnei minei basar. Right, sounds like, okay, so what, Velona Yira? Doesn't appear to be the case. Why? Necheles. So we paskin that how is the chagiga eaten? Roasted. So Rav Yosef makes no sense. Rabbeinu Chananel makes no sense. Rabbeinu Chananel is saying that it should be tzli mevushal. Tosfos is saying, well, 1 second, we paskin the chagiga has to be roasted also. So, okay, but now you have a big problem. Come on, what's the problem?
It doesn't seem so zecher del chagiga.
What?
Whatever anymore. It doesn't seem so zecher.
That's what Tosfos is saying. Tosfos is saying Rabbeinu Chananel, it can't be the way you're holding because you're saying one should be tzli and one roasted and one should be cooked. Okay. But the problem is if it's a true zecher, right? The chagiga was also roasted, so both should be.
Is that not the question?
No, both should be what at this point? Roasted.
Is that not the question?
Oh, but here's the problem. What does Tosfos say?
Yeah.
Mevushalin. So what does Tosfos say? Right, what should Tosfos said at this point? Tosfos' criticism right, both should be roasted, right? It's crazy, right? Tosfos okay, at this point, what?
Zero roasted now?
Yeah, Tosfos says, so since, it's a funny thing, we don't know what he's saying yet, we have to define it, but Tosfos is saying that since Rabbeinu Chananel held really one should be roasted and one should be cooked, right? Roasted like the Pesach, cooked like the Chagiga. Tosfos says, 1 second, that doesn't make any sense, the Chagiga was roasted, right? So what should he have said at this point? Both should be roasted. No, both should be roasted.
Why both?
Because the korban Pesach was roasted, and the chagiga was roasted, so both should be roasted. He doesn't offer that as a possibility. He says, therefore, both should be cooked. Right. Why? I don't understand. Why wouldn't you want both of them to be roasted?
Maybe he's.
Did Rav Yosef now? So now let's go back. What is it? So the machlokas is like this: did Rav Yosef hold shnei tavshilin means 2 types of meat that are cooked, or did Rav Yosef mean 2 types of meat that are cooked, one being roasted, one being cooked?
Maybe he just.
That's methodology. All right. You have 4 positions in the Gemara, and then within one of them a machlokas. All right. So what's the first thing you have to start doing in your mind? What?
Define the overall.
Okay, good. Define the overall issue. Okay, and then you have to start figuring out if you're going to divide them up into camps. How would you divide them up? Who's with who?
Well,
who's with who? Who's the most different of all the shitas? you think about it.
No, Rav Yosef.
Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef stands on his own because Rav Yosef holds you need two pieces of meat, right? Two different pieces of meat. Don't worry about Reina Chanala for now. Just assume he's holding you need two pieces of meat, and therefore the other three positions are
How far you search?
on the other side because they're saying you don't need meat, right? If I were to create a categorical distinction, I'd say the first shita was it Ravuna, Chizkiah, and Ravina all hold. And I'm learning Ravina to mean you don't need meat, by the way, because it seems like most Rishonim run that way. That it's two cooked things, right? Whereas according to Rav Yosef, it has to be two pieces of meat. So that's how I would categorize it in approaching this.
So what does Ravina say?
What's the issue they're arguing on?
What
makes more sense? Who makes more sense? Like Tzvi David said before, who makes more sense? Rav Yosef, right?
Rav Yosef.
Right, because Tzvi David wants to say, you know what? If we're going to do a zecher, that's the best way to do a zecher. So why didn't Rav Huna buy that? But forget Chizki and Ravina. Let's just deal with Rav Huna versus Rav Yosef. Rav Huna says any two cooked things, right? Rav Yosef says no, you got to use meat. Well, why does Rav Huna have a problem with that? And Rav Huna agrees that of course you could use meat, but you're just saying it's perfectly fine to use any two cooked things. Okay, so Tzvi David's focusing on the main thing that the Gemara is focusing on, which is that Bishul. Bishul seems to be the main thing, but why? Why Bishul? And you can't say it's like the Korban Pesach because the Korban Pesach was Tzli. So why Bishul?
No, but I'm saying I don't want to.
He said, good. Okay, so now we're getting the ball rolling here. So what we have to analyze the nature of this zecher here. There's a problem Chazal are facing, a serious problem with what their objective here is. There's a certain objective that Chazal have, and they want to use zecher as the vehicle for that objective, but there's a big problem. What's the problem? If you can isolate the problem, you can see what the machlokas is. What's the problem with the zecher? Think about, whenever you see zecher, look at precedents. Okay, look at precedents. I'll give you two. I can give you the examples, but there's a precedent one direction and a precedent another direction, and each precedent will show you what they're facing. What? You're supposed to, when you have a meal, Gemara brings down, you're supposed to set up an extra plate that's empty. Okay, just keep that in mind. All right, you're supposed to have an extra
empty plate,
a plate that no one's going to use. Okay, so that's one instance of a zecher. But give me another instance of a zecher. Let's talk about sukkahs. Okay, what's the zecher by sukkahs? Lulav. Okay, so lulav every day after the first day is zecher, right? I mean, it's really brought down as a zecher shavua, but anyway, it's a zecher. Okay, all right. Now let's take a look at the lulav for a second. Okay, lulav is like the ideal zecher. Why?
Well, do you not make a bracha?
What's unique about that zecher? What could they do there they can't do here?
Make a bracha.
No, forget bracha.
The exact same thing.
Okay, why not?
Because we don't have the mikdash, we can't make it.
Oh, okay, that's the issue. Now, see like this. In other words, if you want to create a zecher, what do you want to do? You want to do a good zecher? You want to do the exact same thing, lulav, right? But they can't do that here. You can't mimic a korban. See,
Why not?
Very simple, because there's conceptually no reality to anything other than the korban.
Oh, but
we can't give a short.
Your job right now is to worry about Rav Huna, not about Rav Yosef. Let's talk about Rav Huna first. Okay. The problem is this. The problem is that since we don't have mikdash today, and let's assume for now no mizbeach. So is there any reality? And forget the Korban Pesach. It's also the chagiga, right? We surely can't bring the chagiga.
Does mizbeach and shem mizbeach without the mikdash?
That's the whole question. All right. It's a big question that whether you could bring. If you put the mizbeach in the right spot, could you bring a Korban Pesach? But for right now, let's make it simple. For right now, we know one thing for sure, right? You're unable, you cannot replicate in any way the Korban Pesach. All right? I know what you're trying to say. You want to say, but what you're trying to replicate is what? You can't replicate it, but what can you replicate?
What it was.
No. If that were the case, then what would you need to do?
Before.
They don't want you to do that. You have to understand, there's a danger involved. We don't want people to mimic the Korban Pesach. Why? Because what are they going to think?
It's the Korban Pesach.
Right. Notice the most he's willing to go.
You're trying to go zecher. You're trying to.
So why does he say? Why did he just say?
Do we know if Rav Huna would agree with the broth case?
No, he wouldn't. But not because of essentially he would agree with it. In a secondary way, he'll disagree. You'll see why if we get to that. You'll see why. But for now, we got to make that one step. Well, Chazal cannot do a lulav here. They can't do a lulav where you could take the phenomenon and duplicate it. They can't, because you can't duplicate a korban. Once the basic mikdash doesn't exist anymore, there is no conceptual reality to korban pesach whatsoever.
What's the danger to thinking this?
Very simple. Because you think that korban exists outside the realm of mikdash. You think that a korban pesach could exist without the institution of basic mikdash. That's absurd.
So what happened to Rav Yosef?
Hold on. Oh, we'll get them. Hold on. Step by step. All right. I want to make sure this step is clear before I can build the next move. Okay. But you have to understand that's the problem they're facing. It's not like they can't use a lulav. There's no lulav mechanism here. They have no lulav. They can't. There's no way to have a reality korban pesach exist whatsoever. Okay. Meaning that you can't duplicate the korban. Okay. You can't duplicate the korban. Yeah. So if that's the case, okay. But now let me ask you a question. If that were the case, so if that were the case, okay. So let's forget Rav Yosef for a second. We'll get to him, okay. If that were the case, so now my question would be is so what is the halacha then? Forget Tavshilin for 1 second. Let's go to the other extreme, okay. Whatever they want to do, they want to bring in two foods for what purpose?
So now just to clarify.
What? Well, it's interesting. In other words, like we said before. In other words, let's just be honest, okay. If I see a plate of beets and a plate of rice, okay, at my Suda, and fine, they may be cooked, but you're really going to think about the korban pesach and korban chagiga when you see these two cooked dishes?
No, sir.
Why would you? Right? It's a funny thing, right? Yeah. Well, what's the proof? What I'm saying has to be the road you go down. Take korach. Okay, what do you do by korach? Forget that. What do you mean? What do you have by korach? You have
all the elements, the masa, the mar,
and charoses. But what don't you have? You don't put meat in there, right? You don't put meat in there because why? Because what would you think if you put meat in there? That's what I'm having. I'm having the korban pesach. You can't do that, right? They're very nervous about that. They want. See, this is the tension. They want to create a zecher without a mimic, okay? So it's interesting, but yet Rav Huna never entertains the possibility of introducing non-cooked dishes, right? He doesn't say you can have an apple and a banana, right? What is it about cooked? That's the question. Forget Rav Yosef. Don't just take Rav Yosef Shita. Just put it out of your mind. Focus only on Rav Huna. Okay, Rav Huna is saying that conceptually speaking, we don't really have. We can't produce a true zecher in its ideal sense, like a lulav. We can't do that. That we can't do, right? But on the other hand, he doesn't say you could bring two raw pieces of food. He wants them to be cooked. Now you know what? Now you got to be careful. You don't want to say. Okay, yeah. How does Tavshilin accomplish zecher the korban, zecher pesach and chagiga? Yeah. No, but think about how you got to think about how you got to think about. There's an alternate. What's bothering them right now is that if I can't duplicate the korban pesach, that we can't do. We can't duplicate it.
Can we define
so now,
duplicate?
I mean, I can't have. Even if I made
roasted,
if I had a roasted piece of lamb,
okay,
right?
Fine. So what if it's
or set, had a roasted set, it's still
cooked?
What?
Meat cooked? Is that too close, or just meat roasted?
No, that's the reason why you don't want to go down that road. No, the point is,
what's too close? Meat roasted.
At this point, it would seem like anything other than anything that's in any way done to try to mimic the korban pesach is a problem.
No, this whole thing is to mimic.
According to Rav Huna, I cannot do anything that resembles the korban pesach.
What does shame resemble? Does meat cooked have shame resemble?
No.
Okay, only meat roasted.
Right. He says
cold. It
would seem that way. Hold on. Just wait a second. Wait. He says a kol shechem shnei minei basar, so he holds you could use meat. He's not saying you can't use meat. You could, but he's saying there's no reason to. All the other three shittas say that. Yeah. Let's go. Let's take the case of zecher the korban I want to use, and you'll see why it's a good precedent. Okay. Let's say the halacha is that again people won't do it today, but the halacha is that when you set like a and people do this at weddings, but anyway, when you have like a suda, you should have an extra plate, okay? An extra plate, right? Empty. That remains empty. Why is that? What's interesting about that? How does that bring to mind? How does it bring to mind? The plate itself doesn't bring to mind the korban. What? The emptiness, right? But more than that. But what is it? It's extra. Right, that's part of your Suda.
It's a good theory.
But yet, it's not what?
It's not being used.
Part of your Suda. Okay.
Extra nothingness.
Here's the beautiful logical thing that Rav Huna is saying. He's saying something incredible. He said this. He's saying that we can't duplicate the korban pesach. So therefore, the normative mechanism of zecher is not going to work here. Can't do it. Even if I had a roasted set, right, and I followed everything that was supposed to be done, you can't. There's no way to do it. It's not like lulav where the reality of lulav can exist even without the Beis HaMikdash. They can't exist by korban pesach.
He's saying roasted.
So now, what does Rav Huna say? So he's saying, but think about it. What's weird about what he's saying? I mean, the answer's right in front of you, right? Imagine in my meal, or what's the menu for my meal on Seder night, right? Soup, chicken, basar, whatever, vegetables, right? And then what?
Empty plate.
No, that's the korban. And then what?
raw.
No, and then what? Saying, but what's this halacha mandating? And
Snake.
what else? And and to Tavshilin. Okay.
That's a Seder plate. That's not. Something
No, it's part of the ka'ara. First of all, no such thing as a Seder plate. All right, as a ka'ara, the Seder plate's not. That's a later invention. The idea is you have to have. Everyone had their own little tables. You'll see the way I do it in my house is I don't actually have a Seder plate. I use a TV tray and I put on top of it. I don't even have like the little cups. I just put the food on it. That's a halacha. There's no Seder plate's like a one. But all these things are what when you bring the Shnei Tavshilin, again like I said before. It's not mitzvah salayla, right? So when you bring the Shnei Tavshilin and they're on, when you bring them in and they're ready to be over here, they're not actually part of the what? Of the Seder thing, but yet the fact, because you're not going to, there's no chiyuv to eat them. In other words, matzah, mar, etc., all part of the mitzvah, all part of the laila, because you're chayav to eat them. Here you're bringing two things, you're bringing two foods to the meal, right? And yet what? You're not chayav to eat them, right? So what's that going to do according to according to Rav Huna?
It's enough.
That's the zecher. The zecher is the superimposing of two extra dishes. Now you can see why they have to be cooked. Wait, why do they have to be cooked?
I don't think the other way.
To contrast and not cooking.
What? I know, but what is it about cooked?
To contrast and
You
not
have to have the potential to eat it.
Because cooked things in general, and this is why this is the idea about Tisha B'av before.
Please.
All those things on the ka'ara are things that you eat, right? And now we're bringing two edible items, right? That normally when they're edible you eat them, not to eat.
Why cooked?
Oh, so what? Why cooked?
Apples.
No, so why cooked? What is cooking? So now let's go back to the idea mentioned for Tisha B'av. Okay, what does tafshil always mean in halacha? What does tafshil always indicate?
Status change.
Status change, right? No, something wrong could be edible. So the thing is, like tafshilin are when something is cooked. In general, halacha looks at it as an improvement in the thing. But when it comes to seuda, okay, when it comes to ma'aseh, all right, and chashivas, we always look to tafshil as being an indication of chashivas. Like that's why in Erev Tisha B'av you can't have more than one tafshil, because one tafshil you can have a tafshil, but have two tafshilin would indicate a certain chashivas in your suda. Okay, I don't mean suda hamotzi. I mean your eating experience. Okay.
So would Rav?
See, for right now, but the main point is this: the main point is that since you can't do since there's no mechanism to duplicate the chefsa of the Korban Pesach. We can't duplicate that. We can't use that to create a zecher. So Rav Huna is saying, okay, fine, we can't do that. So what are we going to do? We're going to use the normative mitzvah salayla, right, and then bring these two things in, which are not chayiv to eat, right, as extra, right? They're superfluous. That's what's going to create the zecher. I have these two extra cooked things here. That's what produces the zecher. Nothing to do with the chefsa. Okay.
Other side says what again?
One second. Now Rav Yosef saying what you were saying before. Rav Yosef says no, you have to use two pieces of meat.
You don't. You have to.
No, and now by the way, why would Rav Huna say kol sheken shnei minei basar?
What?
Well, hold on. Why would he say that?
Say what?
He says, well, if you want to use two pieces of meat, you could use two pieces of meat.
Sure, you could use.
Why? But why? Why would he have to mention that? Because you can never say you can't use meat.
The other side also said you could, right?
No. The other side said you have to use two pieces of meat.
Maybe you would say that.
Halacha can never come along and say that halacha does not want you to. Halacha is saying that to be yotzei, you can't do anything to duplicate the Korban Pesach, right? But let's say a guy, but you can't limit the guy insofar as what he wants to have.
Why?
Why would you?
Well, we don't eat by korah if we don't have the meat in there.
Oh, but one second. But since it's the very fact that there's additional components that's creating the zecher. So what Tosos and the Rashbam are saying is that it wouldn't matter what the identification of those specific components are. It will make no difference. What's the difference? Because what is creating the zecher? The fact that I had to bring two extra things to the table. Now I'll prove to you why what you were intuiting before is the right approach. See, what's Rav Yosef saying? So the problem they're both facing is that you can't duplicate the chefsa. So Rav Huna is going to say, if I can't duplicate the chefsa, right? So then there's no point in doing what?
Two meats.
Anything. I said it produces it. Okay, but what's Rav Yosef going to say?
You can reproduce the.
Well, no.
Not there's no point. He said you could.
Right. You have to have a zecher. So you can't. But if I can't duplicate the chefsa, there's nothing going to obligate me to go ahead and start using meat.
Right.
But what's Rav Yosef saying? What's he saying? But he's saying even though I can't duplicate, it's true I can't duplicate the chefsa. Normally what would I think? If you want to say zecher means I have to duplicate the chefsa, right? That's the only way to produce zecher, right? So then Rav Yosef checkmate. But what's he saying? Saying, sure, you're right. Maybe I can't duplicate the chefsa, but what can I do?
Experience the chefsa.
I can't duplicate the chefsa, but what can I duplicate? There's a reality. Zecher can emerge through a duplication of what? Not the chefsa, but
The min.
So you'll have
no.
chefsa?
What?
Appearance of the chefsa?
Well, okay. What's appearance an example of?
What?
What's it an example of? A feature.
Right.
A feature of the korban. In other words, like this: the machlokas is beautiful. When it comes to zecher, so machlokas is like this. Everyone agrees I can't duplicate the chefsa of the korban pesach. Right? Everyone agrees with that. The question is, if I can't duplicate the chefsa, does that therefore mean that now I have to create zecher through, let's say, the minimal way, shnei tavshilin, or no, I can still duplicate a feature of the korban. I sure can't duplicate the chefsa, but why not duplicate a feature?
Or does the feature come along with that?
Right. So, right. Is the feature tied to the chefsa, or can I separate that out? So now, what can that already answer? The question that was bothering you before. You can already start sensing what's going to
What
what
question was it?
you were answered by Rabbeinu Chananel. How can he hold
Yitzhak.
sli?
When sleep.
You can already start sensing that sli is already what? I'm not answering yet, but
Either
is it too much or not? Right. In other words, you can start seeing those are
Either
features
too
of the
many
korban.
features, it's
But
actually replicated the chefs or not.
Right, exactly. But the very question is rested upon the notion of when it comes to a zecher, can you once the chefsa can't be duplicated, does that mean the features as well, or no? I can separate the features from the chefsa and say as long as I can create some zecher through the feature, then I should do that. So if Yosef holds, that's why you must use 2 pieces of meat, because what are 2 pieces of meat going to do? That's a feature of Korban Pesach. Yeah, that's a feature. It's a zecher. Okay, so that's the machlokas. That's the machlokas. So that's how you separate the 2 out. So the guys want to know what's the machlokas for Rabbeinu Chananel and Tosfos, right? This is a little difficult. I was thinking about this morning. I came up with 2 approaches this morning. I'll see which one you guys like more. All right, so I think I already can tell which one you guys like more. But anyway, so again, so let's just review. So Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Chananel. Rabbeinu Chananel says that Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Chananel.
he does.
Yeah, he says Perish Rabbeinu Chananel.
No, I thought there was Rashbam.
The Rashbam also quotes Rabbeinu Chananel.
No, they both quoted.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Rabbeinu Chananel says that the Korban Pesach, the 1 piece of meat has to be tzli, Korban Pesach. The other one has to be mevushal, right? Chagiga. But Tosfos says 1 second. Tosfos says, but we clearly paskin that what? We clearly paskin that the chagiga should be roasted. So, right now, at that moment in time, what should a Tosfos have said? Both have to be roasted. Yet, what does he do? He says, no, they both should be cooked. Question is why? What's bothering Tosfos? So I think Tosfos isn't abandoning the svara we have by Rav Huna. Or is he saying like this? He's saying that yes, he agrees with Rav Yosef. Tosfos' learning of Rav Yosef is yes. When it comes to zecher, so you can take a feature of the korban and use that feature in the shnei tavshilin. In other words, zecher can emerge through 1 feature. Right, but but Tosfos is saying, but you got to be very careful, because at the same time we don't want what? We don't want you to try to
fully duplicate.
Right, we don't want you to mimic it. See, zecher means commemorate versus mimicking. So he would hold an additional feature will be a problem. You understand? An additional feature would be a problem. That's why he would never hold to do both sli.
According to Tosfos?
According to Tosfos' way of learning. Why is Tosfos? Wait.
Everyone agrees.
So, but Tosfos say that. Why didn't Tosfos say both should be roasted?
No.
Very simple.
Because
if you have 2 pieces of meat and they're both roasted, how many features, so to speak, how many features now have you?
Everything.
Well, you don't have. It's not necessarily set.
Fine.
But yeah, it's enough. The point is,
You've gotten so far.
right, you've gone from zecher to mimic. So that's why Tosfos goes back to Tavshilin. Tosfos is saying, when the Mishnah says Tavshilin, it means Tavshilin. Why? Because it doesn't want you to think that you can go past 1 feature. So what does Rabbeinu Chananel say? How does he answer that? And Rabbeinu Chananel has to agree that the chagiga was tzli. So how does he get out of that problem? Checkmate? Not a chance. How does he get out of it?
Well, it's not.
Basic question. I mean, So, but why? So why does he say 1 should be tzli, 1 should be mevushal? Or is B'davke saying you're right? He's saying you get out of the. I agree, you're getting out of the problem of the mimicking, but you got to go 1 step logically, 1 step further.
We're supposed to do both.
What does 1 ssli do then? What does it do? What's the objective of having 1 ssli? Why does he have 1 ssli and 1 mevushal? What does that do?
It's closer than both tops.
Why? Right, but what? Why? How's it more zecher?
Both tops.
It's more than that. In other words, he knows both should be tzli, but he's saying no, only 1 will be tzli and 1's not. And you're right. This way prevents him from being over the issue of mimicking. But why have anything tzli at all? What's he accomplishing by having? But I know, but there's. What do you say?
Does he hold it doesn't register without 1 sleeve?
You want to say? But Tosfos would still be bothered because Tosfos would say that once you introduce Sli, you're mimicking. So why does he? I understand what you guys are saying. You're saying the machlokas is that can it only be mimicking if both entities reflect that? That's what you're saying?
It seems from Tosfos just says that the Mishnah is
Yeah,
Tavshilin.
Right.
but how is that unless Rabbi Chanan learns it to be one idea of Zecher?
Right.
If it's two separate, that's what I said. If it's two separate ideas of Zecher, then it's not true though. What we just said.
Right. But I would say like this. I would say that what he's doing is that I hear what you're saying. I was going to go a little bit further than that. I think what he's saying is like this. He's saying that you can't. In other words, the question is, what's the objective of Sli for the Korban Pesach? So Tosfos is learning with Ben Chananel to say that he's trying to introduce that feature into that piece of meat to say, therefore, it's an additional feature and it's like the Korban, right? But I don't think that's Rabbeinu. I think from Rabbeinu Chananel's perspective, he would disagree with what he's trying to. He'd say, no, that's not my objective. What's his objective? If I have one Sli and one Mavushal, what am I not going to say?
Two separate.
But the Chagiga though is not Sli, right? Even though it was Sli. It was Sli, but right now it's not Sli, right? So what do I see now? What does that produce? It's not a greater concept insofar as features are concerned, but what does it accomplish?
Not mimicking.
Well, it's not mimicking. What does it accomplish though? You just said it though. It's
Two separate.
It's differentiating. In other words, it's creating a greater differentiation between the two, right? Because you should remember that one is what? Exactly. So he's saying that's why. Because he's saying the objective isn't to mimic, rather it's to create a differentiation. That's why.
On all your objectives, this is what it looks like.
Right?
Why isn't Sli mimicking?
It can only be mimicking if the objective is to go. It's similar to what you guys are saying. It's
When it's up, it's two separate pieces of meat. That's enough.
I'll tell you why.
Right,
It's very simple. Because think about it. If I have just two different pieces of meat, okay, what do I have in front of me? I have meat A and meat B. Now, which one is the Chagiga and which one's the Pesach?
Haven't we heard?
Wait a second. Which one's the Chagiga and which one's the Pesach?
Whichever you want.
That's the problem. See, what he's saying is that by doing this now, I've clearly differentiated one from the other. Because this one is the Korban Pesach and this one's not. What? Is it the very additional feature per se that produces the mimicking? Or no? As long as the objective of the mimicking isn't there to sit there and create in the meat itself an additional feature, but rather it's just being used to define. No, I'll tell you why he has to say it. Rabbeinu Chananel has to say that though.
I don't understand.
This is the objective idea. He's holding once you add an additional feature, it's irrelevant. I don't care if it's for one, both. It's irrelevant. You can only stick to one feature. That's it. You can't go past that point.
Save it.
If it was really for the purpose of mimicking, right? If it were for the purpose of mimicking, what would Rabbeinu Chananel do?
Both Sli.
Both would have to be Sli. So clearly, the fact he's only making one Sli.
Yeah, but he holds you.
No.
Right, why? I'm saying the reason why he holds you...
Much.
No, I agree with what you're saying. But I'm saying the reason why he holds that's too much is because the objective in the Korban Pesach isn't there to say that this was an additional feature. It's rather to let you contrast the one piece of meat from the other. It's a greater contrast in the pieces of meat. So now I know this one's Pesach, this one's Chagiga. If I have two in front of me, I can say either one, it doesn't matter which one is which. You understand? He's not looking as an additional feature. He's not saying, it's not Kwa Korban Pesach, it's contrast to the Chagiga. Holds it's the objective addition of a feature that's the problem. Once I have one feature in place, I can't add any more. What I'm saying would have to be arbitrary.
So now do you know which? Okay.
It had to be arbitrary.
Once he says that, does that do the Pesach with the Sli? Just one has to be a Sli, one has to be a Bush.
So that's the thing. So we do the the thing is like this. Good question. It seems like the Pesach was Sli and the Chagiga wasn't, right? But I don't know if he's saying that it's Ma'akiv. I'm not sure. This is the next year because this gets into there are sheet as a whole today that B'dafka you shouldn't roast the meat.
The Chagiga was asleep. We said.
Well, it's machlokas. We pass like bentema. And that's what Tosfos' point is. I'm just saying it has to be machlokas. But think about it. So what are the three shitas? You have Rav Huna, Chizkiah, and Ravina, right? Those are all simple logic categories. So Rav Huna holds two separate Tavshilin, right? Chizkiah holds they could be even though they look like they're Tavshil Echad, right? They're still Shnei Tavshilin. And Ravina holds even if it's the same, what do you call it? The same piece of meat. Well, same meat, so to speak, just in two different whatever. Forms. Right. So I mean, categorically, the machlokas is very simple. What they're dealing with two. Come on, categories. They're dealing with two things here. There's.
Right. How much is?
Well, what's and what's? I'm saying there's two categories they're dealing with.
Okay.
Take Rav Huna. Rav Huna's the easiest one. Yeah. Rav Huna requires two things to be Shnei Tavshilin.
Yeah, it needs to be different things.
Okay, so what makes things different? So now be categorical. Okay, physically meaning what? Okay, within physically, there's two things that exist in any object. There's what? This is composed of two things: substance and form. So Rav Huna holds very simple. Shnei Tavshilin is both substance and form. Chizki holds what? As long as you have two different substances.
Even if you
Plastic.
Right, if you shove them together, it
Well,
doesn't matter.
Right, because as long as I have two substances, I'm Yotzei. But the form could be what?
The form could be-
One tafshil. That's what Rashba means. It means that the form is one, but as long as the substances are separate, it's fine. And Ravina holds what?
Even
Form
if
has
some-
to be separate.
The forms have to be separate, the substances could be the same. It's both meat. Right? The same meat. But the forms are different.
the same meat, it sounds like it's Riviosi.
No. He doesn't hold. No one holds that he holds is actually meat. He doesn't have to be meat. He's just saying you could take like, I don't know, let's say like rice and rice juice for such a thing. Okay, so that would be okay. Why? Because, and conceptually speaking, it's one min, it's one substance. Conceptually, it's one substance. It's rice, right? But the two different forms. So what does Shnei Tavshilin mean? According to Ravina, two forms are sufficient.
Two different types of rice.
What? That's two. Well, I mean, is that considered two tafshilin? We'll take that up next week. Then we'll get the more specific halacha l'maisa next week
Next
about
week.
what's on Sunday.
Oh, you're only gonna show once a week?
Well, I'm